You let me know when you're all set.
You can go ahead whenever.
All right, guys, thank you for your patience. Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order this evening's special meeting of the Stevensville School District Board of Trustees. It is December 17th, 2024 at 7:10 p.m. I am Stephanie F. and I'm standing in for Board Chair Ben Meyer this evening. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now take roll of the trustees who are present. Fran. Here. Nathan is not here. Ben is not here. Billy?
Here. Here.
I am here. Tony is not here. Jennifer? Here. Dan?
Here.
Thank you, guys. I'd like to thank you guys all for coming tonight. We will, I'm sticking to the agenda here. There's no special guests to recognize this evening, I imagine. We will now move into public comment. This is a time for comment on all matters that are not on this evening's agenda. Topics for public comment cannot include any pending legal matters, private personnel issues, or private student issues. The purpose of public comment segment of our agenda is for the public to bring a matter that is not on the agenda to the attention of the board for the board's information or for consideration at a later date. The board is precluded from discussing or making decisions regarding public comment items since they are not specified on this meeting's public agenda. Does anybody have any comment at this time? We'll start with the board. Any comments? Any public comment from the public? Thank you. From our business table? All right. Very good. Moving on. We'll move on to the approval of claims. And there is nothing, everything was in our packet. There's nothing that's at our table this evening. Does anybody have any questions regarding claims this evening?
Nope.
All right. Can I get a motion to accept the November claims number 41962 through 41977 in the amount of $13,479.61?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any board comment? Any public comment? All right, a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And Billy, you were one and Jen, you were two?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving right along to our consent agenda items. Are there any questions or comments regarding any of the consent agenda items listed this evening? Is there a consent agenda item that any board member would like to have removed from the list this evening? Hearing none, the consent of the trustee pertains only to the items that they have the authority to decide on. If there are no objections, these agenda items will be adopted by unanimous consent. Hearing none, the consent agenda items are adopted. All right, on to our first item of business, out of district enrollment. High school students
This
this
is
evening?
one high school student. This was a student that we held over from our previous meeting.
And I would just like to apologize to the board and the community. I got frustrated at the last meeting and particularly with this item on the agenda. I called into question another board member's vote, which was inappropriate, and I should not have done that. Everyone has the ability to vote the way they feel they should, and I apologize that this is here tonight. It should have been taken care of last week. And I just wanted to say that.
I will say along those lines, what I have learned in the researching of the quorum/voting record. So the quorum dictates whether or not an official meeting can occur. Voting does not necessarily require a quorum. However, if there isn't a significant or a majority number of votes, that oftentimes can lead to legal challenges of that vote. So we could have voted, we didn't, and I think that's fine. In this particular case, this student isn't looking to start until after the new year anyway. So
Excellent.
it'll work out.
Thank you. Give everybody a minute to take a look at the information. Does anybody have any questions for, yes, we don't have principals, so for Mr. Tennis?
So this student was discussed at the last meeting?
Yes.
I'm sure the question was asked, I don't know in the third statement there, it says, does that say one, like, is that like one?
There was an
issue?
in-school suspension at one point, so 1 day of ISS. And Mr. Kaney recommended approval of this, or acceptance of this student, and so on his research, I'm sure he determined that it was not something that should prevent that.
I'm going to apologize. I even have a note here trying to stick to the format that we had talked about with trying to initiate, starting with a motion, and we jumped straight into conversation. So
Oh, sorry.
no, I was going to check in about that, but so no harm done. Old habits die hard. But questions, motions?
I'm happy to make a motion.
Okay.
Ms. Jennifer.
Nope. Go for it.
I make a motion that we approve out of district enrollments for the high school as presented.
Thank you, Fran.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any board comment on this item? Is there any public comment on this item? We have a motion and a second to approve this out-of-district student as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. That brings us to the sinking fund reinvestment of maturing CD.
Okay, so in your packet is a chart of information, banking information, terms and rates for reinvesting a sinking fund CD. And then we do have a special guest here tonight, 2 meetings in a row.
Terry Valiant, right?
So the decision before the board tonight is where they would like those funds to be invested in, for what term and at what rate.
So in following the model that we want to try to do we want to start with a motion? Do we have anybody abstaining?
I will. Well, problem is if I abstain, then we can't vote, right?
Well, and I believe
That
this
doesn't-
Or
is,
this would come into,
this is, I believe, an elementary only
Yes.
vote, so I cannot vote. But the quorum, there just needs to be a majority vote, no matter who, because I did some research as well, so so the abstentions count as if I understood it correctly, as a no vote.
Well, and we
Or-
can make a motion without voting. We could make a motion and then have a discussion.
Right.
And then if we need to redo the motion, we can do that. Is how I believe it should be done. if we're following that
Just stick to
pattern.
our format.
If we're
Yeah.
following that pattern, and that's the way it should be done.
The abstentions will be a significant part of our
Yes.
conversation going forward, but if anybody has a motion, good time for a motion. Hearing no motions, does anybody have any questions for the business manager? Or for banker in the audience?
I guess
I think
my
we should
only
let-
question,
I think we should let Scott share.
Excellent. Okay.
May I give you some tips?
Yes, please.
So, thank you for the opportunity. A few things. One, I just wanted to kind of point out some of the stuff that we do for the community being a local bank. And I don't know 100%, who is bidding, but, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we are locally owned bank. All of our funds do stay here in the community. Christy and I had visited, a couple months ago. One of the things that I wanted to make, or point to, I guess would be a better way to say it, is, with it being, community funds, we have to assure, and the board has to assure that all funds are FDIC insured. And I wasn't 100% sure that everyone was aware of that, but that is a responsibility on both parties. And so, just wanted to bring attention that these funds are FDIC insured. With the market being quite volatile right now, I don't know if you guys know that tomorrow rates are like a 98% chance that rates are supposed to drop 25 basis points. And so wanted to let you know that regardless of what happens tomorrow, we are going to honor the rates that we have presented. And then maybe bringing a little bit of attention, and I don't know who else has done what, but for us to go out, you had requested an 18-month CD. And that is hard. That is hard for us to do. That is hard for us to project what rates are going to do and be. And I do think there's great value in what we presented. And I think we did well in all of them, but we'll soon find out what everybody had. But in the 18-month CD, that is us giving to the community. I mean, that we feel that's a very good rate to offer for that amount of time. So.
What I would like you guys to know is that the sinking fund CD comes due in June of 26. And so what I've talked to you guys about before is that we have a lot of different funds that we're keeping track of. And so we've been trying to kind of keep it so that we're not having to present all the time to the board. It makes it a little bit easier for us. And so I went out to both of the different banking institutions and asked for rates, 6, 12, and 18 months. And First Security came back with a 6-month and a 12-month. And Farmers came back with 6, 12, and 18 months. And so that's what you see in your packet. And they always go APY.
Yep.
And so Dave did a chart to just show the best that we could. So it doesn't exactly show the percentage. So we're just doing what we believe the yield would be approximately.
And I'm happy to explain that if
Okay.
everyone is on
Yeah.
a little education. So the rate versus the yield. So the yield is required on a federal basis for banks to quote, because a bank can pay interest at different rates during that term. So for example, the easiest way to look at it is if you had a 12-month term, your APY and your APR, and interest is paid at the end of that note. Your rate and your APY are going to be exactly the same because interest is paid at the end. If it's paid 6 months, then there's going to be a little bit of a spread. If it's paid monthly, there's going to be a large spread and to the far extent, which would be very rare. But if it was paid daily, then there would be a large spread. And so in order for the consumer to make an educated decision, to compare apples to apples, we are required to quote the yield because if we had the same rate but one person paid interest at the end of the year versus monthly, then it would not be a fair analysis for the consumer. So that's why the most important thing, regardless what the rate is what the yield is, because that will be what the consumer is. And I don't know if I can do this, but if there are small differences, we appreciate the relationship. We don't mind the small differences, and I don't know if we are able to come back at this point, but if there's a small difference and you say, I like you guys, but you're a little bit off, then we're happy to have that conversation.
Dave and I have talked, and we would like, our recommendation is to go with farmers for the 18 months. And the reason behind that is that it's secure, and we know that rates are fluctuating a lot right now. We've been trying to be very fair-minded about spreading our funds for the district amongst different banking institutions. And we also have 4.6 million at the other banking institution, which is for security of another CD for the sinking fund. And so we feel like that's also equitable. So we're trying to look at both, trying to be fair-minded also, but we also feel that this rate is very good. So that would be our recommendation, but of course you guys need to do what you feel is good.
And I know I don't get to vote on this, but just knowing what I know working in the financial industry, I think going with that longer term right now makes sense because rates are changing. And I think it puts us as a board in a better position. I mean, so.
I do believe what projections are is that we drop 25 tomorrow and then 75 next year. Is what the projection is.
25.
25 basis points, sorry. Yeah,
0.25.
0.25, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I figured there was a math component to what the 25 meant, but I wasn't sure what that translation was. Thank you. And also, I want to apologize for earlier. We are implementing a new format of how we do our order of operations, so we weren't trying to block you out from helping you give us some information and
Yeah,
advice.
all is.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
The only other question that I have, Stephanie, is before a motion is made, is do we have enough to vote, or do we need to potentially think about directing the district like we've done in the past to make that decision?
That is a very good question. So will we have any abstentions tonight?
Well,
You'll be abstaining? Billy? Even,
So does it matter? I mean, if Dan's abstaining and,
we have a couple of options because we can do a vote. Would you like to explain this part of it?
Yeah, so you could vote, and there would be 3 voting, if you choose to vote, there would be 3 voting trustees, which in terms of a quorum is not a quorum, but it's still an acceptable vote. However, if it were challenged legally, it may not hold up because there were not enough votes to support the motion. So it might be in the trustees' best interest to direct business office to invest the funds. But that is a choice I leave to you.
So with that, I
It's an
would be
option.
happy to make a motion if you're ready for that, Stephanie.
I think,
Yeah,
does anybody have any?
I will make a motion that we direct the district office to invest the funds, the sinking funds, certificate deposit 3270 as they see fit.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second for this motion?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further board comment? Any comment from the public? Dan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Fran, how do you vote?
Aye.
You are not voting? I vote aye. Billy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Excellent. Motion passes. Christy, will you send out an email just following up after you've made the investment? Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and helping us make our decision and giving us some good information.
Thanks for giving me a minute.
Thank you for coming twice.
Yes.
Wait 1 second. All right, we are moving on to finalization of the superintendent evaluation tool. Unless I missed anything. Nope, there we are. You will find that in your board packet. Does everybody have a copy of it in front of them? Everybody have a chance to look it over?
Just a little bit of background and a little bit of guidance here, which seems awkward because this is my evaluation. Just in the ad hoc governance, we took a look at evaluation tools. We looked at a couple of different models and really landed on this particular model. And it has been modified from its original form. I think you'll remember the ranking we said would go through 1 through no knowledge vote. It shrinks the range a little bit and creates the unnecessary need for a wider discrepancy amongst trustees. The discussion about evaluation, and this is true of any evaluation, really comes from the feedback that's offered after a score. And so, for example, when you take one of these items, let's say relationship to the board, item A says keeps the board well informed of district activities. Well informed means different things to different people, so it's very subjective. And what you're going to find is that all of these have that subjective sort of nature to them. The value in that is when you come back to that and have the conversation of what does well-informed look like? Is that a report? Is that a monthly report? What does well-informed mean? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it, so that conversation after the fact shapes the business of the superintendent and shapes the business of the district. And so that, I think, is where the value lies in this evaluation, is the actual follow-up. So tonight, what I would suggest that you do is, and maybe you've already done some of this, is look for items that are unnecessary, unneeded, or redundant. And if there are items that you feel like are omitted, add those back in. Your task tonight is to finalize this. This would be the evaluation tool that would be used in January to go through a formal evaluation of my job performance. And then, like I said, the most valuable part of that would come in the feedback that follows that evaluation. Any questions?
I'd like to thank Jennifer. She's responsible for a lot of what you see here.
Stephanie.
Stephanie, I'm sorry.
I mean, I'd love to take the credit, but I had zero influence on
Stephanie
this
put in a
one.
lot of time outside of the committee meeting to put this doc together. So thank you for your time here, Stephanie.
I think this is a good instance to not try to start with a motion. I think that could get pretty awkward, pretty fast, pretty clumsy. So, I think we start with questions, or if there's items that somebody wants to take a closer look at, or.
So has this has been beat up in committees already, correct?
A little bit, yeah.
So this is kind of a final presentation to the board saying, this is what we recommend.
Okay, this was the work of the ad hoc committee. We spent a number of sessions and hours
Right.
going through these. This is what we came up with for the board to do, was it please?
And that was kind of what I was getting at, because it kind of seemed that the way Dave presented it, we were supposed to beat it up tonight. It's gonna be here forever. But if it's already been beat up and it's a presentation from the committee, then that makes it a little bit easier.
I do think, the point of you guys with fresh eyes, being able to look for, like the redundancies, the questions in here. Ideally, there's not a lot of questions that people are answering no knowledge on. So if you're seeing a number of those, then we either need to just rework the question right quick or knock it out or whatever seems appropriate. There can be some one-offs that are no knowledge, but hopefully that's not the majority of what you're seeing. Or if it is, let's work on that. Fran?
I feel kind of, as a new member of the board, I mean, though I've attended lots of meetings, I've never necessarily seen the evaluation
Right.
because it's a closed meeting typically.
Mhm.
And so I find myself in an awkward position as I read through all of these a couple of days ago, that I don't really know the whole process of it. And so some of them seem to me, I'll give you for instance, under relationship with staff, G, meets regularly with building administration to assess needs, celebrate successes, and present new programming. I don't know that I know that.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, yes, we want to know if he's doing that, but I don't know. I feel like I don't have any way of knowing some of the things that are in here. And so I guess one of my questions, because I'm not familiar with the process, is, are there some things that Dave will present to us as superintendent during his evaluation that would allow us to score these after he presents something to us?
Well, that's one of the reasons why, if you look at the bottom, one of the options is that you can say,
Right.
You could ask Dave for, you fill out, you're going to have the opportunity and time to fill the
Okay.
stock out. So you could certainly, well, I would think, call up Dave and say, Dave, could we visit about this particular item? And can you share whatever with me?
Okay.
One of the things that Dave is going to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, is going to do in January.
Okay.
He will get to have dialogue with back and forth, and that'll be in closed session too. So we can get some of that will come out there.
It might be answered.
But I think you could certainly ask Dave before, and sure, I don't know that.
Okay. Thank you.
But I think, as someone who's gone through the process a few times, I think, I know for myself, when I've evaluated it, I think I look at, what's presented as, in committees, in superintendent reports, what do I hear, and it is, what do I hear from, different stakeholders too, that I use, and I may not have personal knowledge, but I mean, I think all that, you have to put all of that in. One of the questions that kind of popped out at me that I wondered how I would answer is in, relationship with the board, that maintains an effective relationship with the board as a whole. Cause I know the relationship we have had, but I don't know necessarily how that, how the whole board, although I guess, I mean, a whole board as in meetings, there's way,
Right.
you can think it through, and the more I talk, the more I understand the question.
And
So,
the one thing we talked about too, when we were talking it through, was ideally we're using this to perpetuate the conversation. And so, if we find questions that we at least feel good about, none of the questions are going to be perfect. They will all be things that you can pick apart, or, well, how do you operationally define this? Or like, where's the metric here? But it is to, as Mr. Tennis was saying, like to find, what is your sense on this? Like, where is that? And does it need to move this way? Or is it in a good place and going in the right direction? So this is to facilitate a conversation And, ideally, I can get in my head really quick about what does this word mean, or take this to this place, and do I know this specifically? So ideally, I never want to say like, don't overthink it, because that doesn't sound like what we don't want to do. But not to get in our heads too much and to try to take it sort
Well,
of
and I think
as is.
we want it to be not too broad, but also not too focused
Mhm.
as well. It has to have some kind of balance
You can get to a
for
place.
it to be, make sense.
Yes,
Too.
absolutely.
I guess one of my concerns is I just glanced through it, like I said, is someone who's new to the process. And I'm thinking, I mean, these and the one that stands out to me, management and skills, there are we go all the way to L on that one, and to M with staff, or to O with staff. And I think, oh my goodness, how much time are we fixing to spend on this when we do his evaluation? That's one of the things that I think about. At the same time, I'm with Billy. I mean, if this has already been beat up, we don't need to beat this up anymore. That's just one of my concerns. How long is this evaluation going to take if we've got sections of it that are going almost all the way through the alphabet?
Right.
It doesn't, I mean, it's kind of surprising to me, even on our past evaluations that were, I feel like, longer than this.
Okay. And Seattle,
They weren't horrible long. I mean, it wasn't awful. I don't remember being there.
So I think typically we go back and forth with what are the, what does everyone number like a section? And then as far as comments go, it's, each person throws out one or two things, but
I'm sure it'll work. And in committee, we did talk about that we could, instead of reciting our numbers out loud in the meeting, that we could submit it possibly, if everybody was comfortable, on a Google form ahead of time, and then we would bring the numbers, so it would still be very transparent. We'd be able to see how everybody is scoring, and then be able to talk through and say what our comments are, and be able to kind of process the data that way, which might.
And maybe address the things that are the most concerning things on there. I think that's great.
and then that last section of general questions, those are longhand. I mean,
Those would all be narrative style.
would you like a motion? And
We certainly could do a motion if everybody's had enough time to process. It looks like people are.
I'll throw one out there, and
Okay.
I would make a motion to finalize the superintendent evaluation tool as presented.
We have a motion from Jennifer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jen, and then Fran. Do we have any further board comments? Administrative comments?
The only comment is, I think even though there may be some areas where there's a lot of different subsections and headings in there, I think that, again, if collectively a score is low from all trustees, it's going to indicate a need. It's going to indicate an area that could be improved, and that's what this is it's an improvement. So.
Let me come back to your comment. Is the board comfortable with filling this doc out, sending it into the whomever, having it collated so that when we get to the actual meeting, we are going through this item by item, number by number, individual by individual? That yes or no?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I think,
So I present something that we end up and then comes back where we don't do this. Because I think that's our intent when we left the meeting.
Yeah,
We're on board with that idea.
yeah, I mean, I personally think that that's the way to do it. I
Yes.
mean, it's a time saving thing. And if we're, I mean, we know from doing, our goal setting and stuff, we can't address every single thing. But we can address the most important things in the evaluation if we know that it's most concerning to most of the board.
Well, I think our intent was that you would take the doc and go through all that.
Yeah,
And then have it collated.
and that, right.
well, like Dave mentioned, I mean, it's a tool for improvement, for helping Dave improve, not so that we can publicly beat up Dave. So-
Exactly.
Which sometimes you get so detailed, it's like, gosh.
Well, and it would be within the board, it would be kept private. It wouldn't be a public document.
The only thing that you would want to maintain is the voting and the scoring of each individual trustee. I know we want to collectively, get to a score, but you're going to want to keep the raw data as well, as part of that. I think that's the appropriate way to do that.
Has the committee put into place a plan for how that data collection is gonna happen and like timelines so that we as board members know when we'll get the tool, how long we'll have to fill it out?
That's
So
a good
that,
question. It's not been determined. We've talked about using a Google form. What is everybody's thoughts on how long is appropriate to have it so that you can make a mindful assessment? If we were doing this, we'll do this at the intention is at the January regular meeting. So that's the 4th, 6th, 7th, the 14th.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
It'd be nice to have it as soon as possible.
I was gonna say, I mean, I
Especially
would like
Christmas.
to have it ahead of the board packet for sure, because.
so we'll have to
Absolutely.
have it completed and compiled before
So
the board.
you
Right,
have it in your
right.
possession, so you can make your notes and that sort of thing.
Oh,
And
that's
then
true.
a scoring rubric can be sent to you electronically and then you can submit your score.
That's true.
Yeah. Does that sound?
Mhm.
Okay.
But I think particularly for board members who are not here,
We should
that
get that
they'll need
information
to, and need to know who to turn their information to and when they need it to have it all compiled before that board meeting on the 14th. Because they're gonna need time to compile it all.
We'll get this information out to them. Well, they've had it in their board packets too, but we'll talk about through.
But timeline stuff.
Yeah, thank you. That would be helpful. Any further board comments? Any public comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the evaluation tools presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Additional item?
Yeah, so our one informational item is the continuation of a discussion that started several weeks back about the potential land swap with the Stevensville Community Foundation. It's given us an opportunity to collect, perspective from the foundation, from various trustees. We had a pretty lengthy discussion today in our facilities committee meeting. And really, we kind of arrived at a pretty common, a common theme or a recommendation that the facilities committee would like to make to the board. And that is the committee is interested in doing a land swap with the community foundation, but only if that land swap is someplace that is very near the complex, the school complex as it exists now. There can be a potential shared school use of that facility. The committee was very clear that by swapping this land for a piece of property that is up on the other side of the supply ditch was not something that they were interested in, at least the committee was interested in a swap in that case. And so that is where our discussion was whittled down to, was a recommendation that if we're going to do a land swap, that the land swap be in an area that the land is accessible to the existing school complex as it is now. In your, on your table, I left a chunk of a diagram, and this is from the district's 20-year plan. And I know it might be hard to kind of comprehend what this is, but when you look, I think the easiest way to orient you is to look at the high school gym floor, which is in white on the picture. This is just an example of some of the things the district had in mind for future construction projects. There was an auditorium, there was a wrestling room, there were locker rooms, there was a weight room. Well, we currently now have an APC, a weight room. We also have a wrestling room. So those pieces of that particular puzzle are honestly already taken care of on campus. And so if you can imagine for a minute that the community center being what would be the side-by-side basketball courts there that would be in very close proximity to the districts, the campus, the school campus. It would need to be, because of some of the things that the community would want to use the facility for, would need to be unattached to the school district property. So it's not something that we would build as a connection. So it wouldn't necessarily have a hallway from here to there, but it would be a standalone building that could be used for school functions and it could be used for community functions. And I think it makes sense if that were going to be the case, that the community functions be free to have whatever sorts of items they want to have in that particular venue, but it also would be something that would be accessible to the school. So that's where we landed. Billy, did I miss anything, you think?
Nope, other than the white basketball court is actually the NPR.
Correct, sorry.
The current
Okay,
court
thank
is
you.
not, the current court is not in the
Shown
picture,
on it.
so, but it's kind of at the end of where the vestibule would be, it's kind of right there, the existing one.
Have we had any feedback from the community foundation since they were here?
I have had one follow-up conversation, and they are pleasantly surprised that the district is entertaining the option. And I think they were surprised that there was the potential for a shared use in our previous conversations, because I think initially what they were hoping to do was to swap land and move up into the APC area and move forward with their plans. And then when the discussion turned to the potential of some sort of shared facility, then that kind of changed things. They are under a timeline. They have some things that are coming due for them, I think in April, early April. And that comes from our last discussion. And so again, this is not something that we're voting on tonight. It was just to continue the conversation about this. At some point, we will have to present this item. We don't have to, but need to make a decision as to whether or not there is need for action from the board and what that would look like. But the recommendation from the committee is if there is going to be a land swap, that the land that is swapped is something close to the existing school facility right now, not on the other side of the supply ditch.
I think in part of our conversation before that there was mention that we might need to get with VIA to find out the legal. Have we touched base with VIA?
I have, and it's definitely doable. It's gonna require some upgrade in some of our policies. And obviously, if this becomes an item that becomes actionable by the board, there's going to be a series of things that has to happen. You know, looking at engineering, looking at legal things, having some sort of, this is a public land, so we're gonna have to have appraisals and all of those sorts of things that would need to be finished, and professionals would need to supply that information for you so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not you want to swap land.
Well, and then even after the swap, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is scheduling, like who's responsible. I mean, there's some things like that that will need to be worked out because, you know, if we're going to use it as a school facility and a community facility, you have to make sure that the scheduling is handled and who's going to handle that and make sure that the school has equal access to the community's access to it and things like that too. So I think that those will be things that'll have to be dealt with.
It definitely would require a lot of logistical conversation and
Right.
agreement as to the use of the facility and the timing of the use of the facility, because, you know, for instance, if we're having students that are doing testing, ACT testing, let's say, and we've got a, you know, a loud event in the community center during the school day, you've got a whole bunch of issues that are
Right.
going on there, and that, you know, so we would have to work out this.
Well, and I think, I mean, from the school perspective and the idea that we could have this shared space, I think it's amazing. I'm concerned that having the school involved will become a roadblock to the community foundation already had, that, you know, they worked with the school, they worked with these other entities, and that's partially what stopped them 20 years ago. And I hate to see that come about again. And I feel like it's more mutually beneficial to us than them, but that would be, I guess, for them to decide.
I think one of the thoughts too on some of that kind of stuff, especially the logistics of planning and scheduling and stuff like that, they don't really have the resources for that, but the school does. And obviously, you know, there would have to be, but there's going to have to be a working together, but I don't know that they could, you know, staff and maintain and, you know, do all the cleaning and all that kind of stuff up at the facility like this. So having the school take on that part of it, I think is a positive
Well, and
for them.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, you're
interrupt you. And that's definitely logistical stuff that has to be, I mean, to avoid what has happened in the past, make sure that that is all written up and understood ahead of time before we start breaking ground on something, because, you know, that's what's kept the school from doing things before, is that the school all of a sudden has to take up the maintenance of it. And while it's a good idea, we have to decide whether that fits into our budget, or is the community foundation going to contribute X amount of dollars to help with the upkeep and with the cleaning and things like that? Because we definitely don't need to get in a situation where all of a sudden legitimately that they're not going to be able to do that, right? But we don't want to assume all the expenses on a shared expense on a shared property. The
And I think
school
that's where rental fees and all those kinds of
Right,
things. can
right.
really help with all
Yeah.
that stuff too. But there is, I mean, and the hard part is they need to know something very soon.
Right.
So we have to come up with some kind of at least fairly detailed plan. I mean, obviously there's a lot of parts that we can't even fathom right now, especially without talking to VIA and all those kinds of things. But at the same time, we gotta have something to present to them.
I don't think we can do this in isolation. This is gonna happen, and it's gonna have to be done collaboratively. Or obviously,
Right.
having been through this a few decades ago, there's things here that we haven't even thought of yet if we're gonna collaboratively do this that are going to need to be worked on. So I don't know if haste would make waste, but can't do it in isolation.
What does it look like logistically if we formalize a land swap, we get over all the obstacles and figure out all the pieces, and then this is a half-formed thought or question, but are either unable to build or like, so it's not exactly a literal land swap, or the land is
Nothing happens.
like okay, so that stays in trust to them, that stays in trust to us, like how, does this land, they can't just go do anything willy-nilly with it, it'll be contracted.
There would have to be an agreement, but you make a good point. And hopefully I understand you correctly, but
I don't
yeah,
understand.
you do this swap and you say, we're gonna swap this chunk of land. And then that land, nothing happens with that land. It sits there and it becomes a chunk in the school district's broader footprint that doesn't belong to us. And so, and maybe the project never grows legs and it never really materializes. And now you just we would have obviously the property at the end of the road, but we would have this other property that is kind of just sitting there in the midst of our domain.
Well, then also, what is the upkeep of that property on the corner? And what kind of expense will we have there?
And so the other thing that we had talked about when the community foundation was here is them selling that property, just going through with the sale of that property and us still collaborating on a shared facility that they would help build. And so I think that that's something that we really need to think about when we're talking about there's a timeline, right? And so it might be some here, rather than having that chunk of land, that if they sell that property and then they want to collaborate with the school to build a facility, that may be a different way to go about that.
So they actually have the funds to start their project.
Exactly, because they already have some funds set aside and their intentions were they're going to sell that property and hopefully find another piece of property to do a building. Am I right on that, Billy? Isn't that what they were kind of thinking?
It is, and you are at the facilities committee meeting. It was just, there's a lot of people that just felt like we want that piece of property for whatever reason. And so that idea was kind of put off because they wanted that piece of property.
So what do we want the property for, I guess is my question.
I'm not one of those. I don't really care. So
Yeah.
I think they're just thinking something way down the road. I don't know. You know, they're already talked about moving the softball field and then all those events up there. So now you have this huge strip down there that can be used for whatever. Yeah, I don't know. But, so yeah, so that was kind of where how the facilities committee came up with just this proposal like this with the land swap the way it is versus the selling thing. You know, because there are some that want that piece of property.
Or if they sold that piece of property, they have nothing to swap with us as a school district. So then there become legal and other issues involved in how do they acquire or what do we do
Right.
with our property that, and I think that could get pretty interesting.
Yeah, we did talk about that and the fact that if it's our property, there's certain things that they can't do with the community center because it's on school property at that
Talking
point.
about the construction of
Right, and you can't give away public property at
can't
a
just give it
reduced
away.
rate. It has to be market value. Yeah,
Right.
you can't give away taxpayer money or taxpayer ownership of
So,
land.
right,
for-
you can do like a long-term
Right.
lease with.
Just seems a lot to work through.
There is a
in
lot to work
relatively
through.
short time,
Yes.
right? Because they have to make a decision too on what they're gonna do. And I think I'm in the same spot that Dan's pointing out, we need to not do this hastily. It needs to be planned out, but I'm not sure how much time we have.
And their time frame is short. I mean, obviously
Exactly.
ours isn't, but theirs is.
Right. And so I'm not sure how much time we have to give them what the work that we need to do as a board.
I think it's even more so than that, is I just don't necessarily see how it's beneficial to them in the grand scheme.
Other than just having the community center.
Right.
That's their,
They get their facility.
yeah, that's what they.
Right.
I'll come back to where this started 20 years ago. And school got involved in this process. And didn't go any further. And school's involvement in the process was a contributing factor in that not going into it. There were other factors that were involved as well. That wasn't just not a factor, but it was a contributing factor with the school involvement in it. So if somebody wants to build a community center, I'm all in favor of it. I'm more than glad to support it because it did 20 years ago when I was involved in it. But I'm gonna come back to Jen. I'm a little reticent to see us get involved and tangled with the process, the project that I think they should be driving. And I think the less we're involved, the less cumbersome it becomes, the less difficult it becomes for them to facilitate what they want to do. That's just me, based on my experience from 20 years ago with this.
What are our next steps to see if we're moving forward or not?
I would suggest that if there are questions, concerns, comments, that those individually get shared with me, which I can then share the dialogue and the comments collectively with the facilities committee. I think things need to get funneled to that group and then back out to the larger group as a whole to refine the information. And then at some point, you know, the trustees are gonna say, we need to continue this conversation or we need to just let this go. And, but I think for right now, as you have thoughts, concerns, questions, please forward those to me. And then I will share those in our facility meetings and we will try to go through as much of that as we can. And then report back to the larger board about what we are able to find or
We kind of need to do it. I mean, in respect to them, we got to do this.
for sure. Yeah.
Soon.
Yeah, I would say, you know, not to put pressure or stress on people, but I think they're gonna need to know whether or not they got to move by probably the end of February.
I think that's what Joyce said.
Yeah.
February is kind of the timelines.
Any further board comment or can I, thank you.
A couple of thoughts. I mean, I heard you say, well, the school could take on administering that, cleaning that. We're not getting that done now. Our administrators have too much on their plate. To add one more thing, our custodial crew, I mean, it's slim pickings and we're cleaning. It's not a thorough job now. Add one more building, it's gonna be a nightmare. The upkeep, maintenance on the buildings we have, I don't think is getting done. I mean, there's things that I don't see how the school, I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing and I supported it last time, but there's some major things that, financial things that, I mean, that have to be thought out. And not knowing, I don't have a map, so I don't really understand what property you're swapping for. So that's, I mean, I'm not visual.
And I don't think we don't have that yet. There's just a possibility.
But I don't even understand where the possibility is right now. I don't have that map in front of me. that
Not the map.
says-
Well, I got it.
Yeah. But I don't understand that.
There's NPR.
Do you guys want a map? Anybody else?
This is that old
Good.
initial.
Dave, if you ask any of members of the community to come to the facilities committee meetings where this is being discussed?
I have not asked, all we've had is the community foundation presenting to the
Did that one time at that board meeting?
Yes.
Where we caught him by surprise?
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. As far as-
But, I mean,
There's a lot of money issues that are.
there's a lot of issues and it concerns me because
Oh, I'll go back. I mean, I think I don't think it's beneficial to them necessarily, because I don't think we have the money to do what we would need to do as part of it. And I think I kind of understand the wanting to keep this property as part of the school district, but at the same time, it's far enough away that it's not really gonna impact the school if it goes to someone else. And so I mean, I feel like all we're doing is slowing down their timeline. And I feel like, because realistically, I don't see how the school district, with what we're looking at and what we're trying to do, just maintaining, like as Molly said, I just don't see this as something that we should be. I don't think we would be good stewards of what we have if we tried to get involved.
Definitely. My bigger concern is back to what I had said when they were here, is that, I mean, everybody here was involved, besides Dave, with the whole building situation and looking at, there's all these spots of where people own property, and the idea of having somebody right in the middle of our footprint of our district again, that is not interesting to me at all as a board member, because when you start having spots of land all over the place, it just makes for a big mess when you're trying to expand stuff. I know that was part of a challenge when we were expanding before, is figuring out what we owned and what we didn't own, and finding pieces of property right in the middle of our property that we owned. So it just doesn't entice me at all to potentially have some new ownership in the middle of our property.
If I were to make a recommendation to the folks that are driving this project, my recommendation was, we are kind of divided and not sure what we want to do. My recommendation is you probably need to go ahead and do what you think you need to do. We'll see how that all shakes out, but it doesn't sound like, and again, I'm back to my involvement however many years ago. I have great reservations here about getting involved and doing this again. Once burned, twice shy, whatever, or lessons learned maybe.
Well, are you guys game to collect some of those thoughts and comments too, and send them directly to you, and you can pipe them through facilities and to the community foundation, and see if there's anything that can support answering some of the questions or kind of hashing it out a little bit?
Do you want to put a timeline on that?
I would say we get these comments and we have this kind of last conversation in the next facilities committee meeting. And at that point, make a recommendation to whether or not this is going to move forward as an item on the agenda or not. So we would have our January facilities meeting, report early in the February meeting about a decision. And that decision it's a non-committal decision. It's a decision whether or not to continue pursuing this or not. And that doesn't necessarily have to be an action item. That could be an informational item. Really what I would be looking for in this case, if there was the will of the board was there, then it would move to me into an item that would become an action item. But it doesn't, no harm, no foul in having the conversation about it. And I think, if everybody here was thrilled and sees a lot of potential, then maybe that's something that goes to an actual vote and an action item. If it's not, then we don't take it then. But I would think that we need to tighten that up and make a decision probably by the February meeting. Procedurally, share your comments and feedback to me. I'll pass it along and have it on the facilities agenda. We'll share that and then report back to the board in February, and we'll know whether or not that is something that is.
Would you care to email the board members who are not here, or just send out a blanket email saying,
Sure.
send emails here so that
Yes.
those guys are included as well?
Yep.
Thank you. Good.
Mentioned earlier,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't do this to Vicky. Can you state your name for them?
Gables,
Thank you.
there you go. Mentioned earlier, that the community foundation had a deadline,
February, I think. If I remember right, yeah, because they gotta get this thing on the market and get it sold.
what has to happen?
We just need to
by
make it,
February?
we just need to make a decision if we want to make them like a legit offer for a swap. To release them, we either need to make an agreement with them or release them to sell, because they're kind of waiting on us right now.
So in order to do that, you're gonna have to decide pretty much every single thing that you want out of that, correct? There's a lot of sit down and sending a lot of stuff. So then I present them with a list, and then they can either say yes or no. Is that correct? And then assuming that they were gonna fund it, fund construction, if that happens.
Yeah, I don't see this as being a school district taking on that, the idea of construction, but I'm the superintendent, I'm not a trustee.
And if they were building a community center, it was up to their project, even though it was a shared.
I think we're being really unfair to the community foundation. I think we come back to what I said, should say to those folks. If we're having discussions, it doesn't sound like, from what I hear just here, it doesn't sound like there is that much or too many questions. I think Skip's point, I think it would be in the best interest of both of us to say to the community foundation, you guys go ahead and do what you need to do, put that property on the market. It isn't, who knows, it might sit down there and never get sold. And so the dialogue could continue.
They have no obligation to do this with us. We don't have an agreement. They just reached out for the possibility and the potential of this. So they could sell that land. They could put that up for sale.
Oh, yeah, they're just giving us grace.
Yeah,
They're just think about
Buying
it.
some time while we're having these conversations.
I mean, if you want to tell them that we're not fully united and they want to walk away, like that seems fair, but also to give us another month to hash out some questions and feel like we went in all the way and made a clear decision. I am not opposed to that if they can make whatever decision they want and they want. That's good.
I think there might be a little bit of overthinking on some of this stuff on fairness and community foundation. That's really their choice. That's their decision. All you can do is present everything you need out of that thing. And they can say, no, it's not really fair to us, so we'll hard feelings, we'll go separate ways. For us to sit there and worry about whether it's fair to them, it's kind of a waste of time. That's that decision.
Any further comment, or do we feel like we've gone around a little bit?
So everybody's gonna shoot comments to Dave.
Right. And I'll send some communication out tomorrow. People have the venue to share their thoughts, and the good, the bad, the ugly. And I'll collect that and create an agenda item for our facilities committee and discuss it there. In the meantime, I'll also reach out to the community foundation and tell them that there definitely are more questions than clarity at this point. I kind of want to wait to see what some of that feedback is too.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody, for the good conversation and for coming out tonight. That concludes our agenda items for the evening. Would anybody care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any board comment? Any public comment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Still waiting for someone to say no to that. I guess I haven't gotten cranky enough. Poor Dan was the only one here last week when I was on.